history is wrong? What if some of the objects we've discovered were never supposed to exist where they were found? Across the world, archaeologists, divers, and explorers have uncovered artifacts in places that make no sense. Objects buried in the wrong era. Mechanisms too advanced for their time. Ancient items discovered in locations that raise more questions than answers. And the strangest part is, some of these discoveries still don't have a satisfying explanation. Tonight, we're looking at 5 artifacts found in places they should never have been, because sometimes the most disturbing mysteries aren't legends. They're real objects you can actually hold in your hands. From the bottom of the ocean to forgotten tombs, from sealed ruins to layers of rock millions of years old, these discoveries continue to challenge the stories we tell ourselves about the past. Some people believe they are proof of lost civilizations. Others say they are simply misunderstandings, coincidences, or modern mistakes mixed into ancient ground. But no matter what explanation you believe, one thing is certain. These artifacts were found in places so strange, so unexpected, that they turned into mysteries of their own. Let's begin. Number 1. The Antikythera mechanism. In 1901, sponge divers exploring the remains of an ancient shipwreck off the coast of the Greek island Antikythera made a discovery that would completely shock the scientific world. At first, the object didn't look impressive. It was just a corroded lump of bronze, broken and covered in centuries of mineral buildup. It looked more like scrap metal than something important, but when researchers began cleaning it, they realized they were looking at something extraordinary. Inside the corrosion were gears, dozens of them, tiny, precise bronze gears arranged in a way no one expected from the ancient world. The shipwreck itself dated back more than 2,000 years, to around the 1st century BCE. But the object found inside it seemed impossibly advanced. It wasn't a statue, a weapon, or jewelry. It was a machine. As scientists studied it more closely, they came to a stunning conclusion. The Antikythera mechanism was an ancient analog computer, built to track astronomical positions, predict eclipses, and possibly even follow planetary movements. That alone would be astonishing. But what made the artifact so disturbing was where and when it was found. No one expected this level of mechanical complexity in the ancient Mediterranean. Devices with similar gear systems wouldn't appear again in Europe for well over 1,000 years. Think about that. A machine this sophisticated was sitting at the bottom of the sea, inside an ancient shipwreck, waiting to be discovered by accident. And when it was found, it seemed less like a relic from the ancient world, and more like something that had somehow fallen out of the future. To this day, historians still debate how such knowledge was lost. Was this a one-of-a-kind invention? Was it part of a tradition of technology we barely understand? Or was there once a level of scientific engineering in the ancient world far beyond what we were taught to imagine? Whatever the answer is, the Antikythera mechanism was found in exactly the wrong place for something so advanced. And that's what makes it unforgettable. Number 2. The Baghdad Battery. In the 1930s, near Baghdad, archaeologists discovered a small clay jar, unlike almost anything else found in the region. At first glance, it didn't seem mysterious. It was a simple-looking vessel, only a few inches tall, but inside it was something strange. A copper cylinder and an iron rod, carefully arranged in a way that immediately caught attention. This object later became known as the Baghdad Battery. Why? Because some researchers suggested that if filled with an acidic liquid like vinegar or grape juice, the jar could produce a small electric current. That idea alone turned the object into one of the most controversial artifacts in archaeology. The artifact was believed to date back roughly 2,000 years, possibly to the Parthian or Sasanian period. If the battery theory were true, it would mean ancient people may have discovered a primitive form of electricity long before modern science officially did. And again, it wasn't just the object itself that was strange. It was the context. This wasn't found in a laboratory. It wasn't discovered alongside obvious electrical tools or large machines. It was found among ordinary archaeological remains in an area tied to the ancient world, a place where no one expected evidence of experimental electrical devices. Supporters of the battery theory have argued that it may have been used for electroplating, ritual practices, or some lost technical process. Skeptics, however, are not convinced. Some experts argue it may have simply been a storage vessel, a scroll container, or an object with a completely different purpose. They point out that there is no solid proof ancient people used it as a battery in any meaningful way, and that uncertainty is exactly what keeps the mystery alive, because even if it wasn't technically a battery, the design is still weirdly suggestive. It looks functional, intentional, almost engineered, and if it really could create electricity, then the artifact was found in a place that forces us to rethink what ancient people may have known. Sometimes the most unsettling discoveries are not the ones that prove something. They're the ones that almost do. Number 3. The London Hammer. Most mysterious artifacts are ancient, but some are disturbing for a different reason, because they appear to be trapped inside something far older than they should be. One of the strangest examples is the so-called London Hammer. According to the story, in 1936, a couple walking near London, Texas found a rock with part of a wooden handle sticking out of it. When the rock was later broken open, it revealed what looked like an iron hammerhead embedded inside ancient stone. And that's where the mystery exploded. Because if the surrounding rock really was as old as some claimed, then the hammer had no business being there. Some people immediately treated it as evidence that human tools existed far earlier than mainstream history allows. Others pushed even further, suggesting lost civilizations, or something even more extraordinary. The image itself is undeniably eerie, a man-made tool trapped inside stone, like time had sealed it away. But as with many artifact mysteries, the truth may be more complicated. Critics argue that mineral buildup can harden around relatively modern objects and make them look impossibly ancient. In other words, the hammer might not actually be millions of years old. It may simply have become encased in a natural concretion. Still, that explanation hasn't stopped the artifact from becoming famous, because visually, it feels wrong. It triggers that deep, instinctive discomfort we feel when something appears to break the rules of time. A hammer belongs in a toolbox, or maybe buried underground in an old site, but sealed inside rock. That feels like a mistake in reality. Whether it is genuine evidence of a historical anomaly or simply a geological illusion, the London Hammer remains one of the most talked about out-of-place artifacts ever found, not because we know exactly what it is, but because we don't, and because it looks like something that shouldn't be possible. Number 4. The Saqqara bird. In 1898, inside a tomb in Saqqara, Egypt, archaeologists found a small carved object made of sycamore wood. It was only about 6 inches long, and at first, it seemed unremarkable. A simple bird figurine. Ancient Egypt was filled with carved symbols, sacred animals, and decorative objects, so there was no immediate reason to think this one was special. But over time, people began noticing something unusual. The Saqqara bird didn't really look like a bird. Its wings were straight and shaped more like aerodynamic surfaces. Its tail was vertical, not horizontal like a real bird's tail feathers, and its body looked strangely streamlined. to some observers, it looked less like an animal and more like a glider or a model aircraft. That interpretation transformed a small tomb object into a major mystery. Was it just a toy, a religious symbol, or could it represent an understanding of flight far earlier than anyone expected? Supporters of the flight theory have built replicas and argued that the proportions resemble those of certain aircraft designs. They suggest the artifact may reflect experiments, ideas, or principles that were somehow known in the ancient world. Most mainstream scholars disagree. They believe it was likely a symbolic carving, possibly related to ritual or art, and that the aircraft comparison is exaggerated by modern imagination. But once you see it, it's hard to ignore, because the object was found in a tomb, a place where symbolic meaning mattered deeply. Yet its shape continues to trigger modern technical interpretations, and that tension is what makes it fascinating. It was discovered in an ancient burial site among objects tied to one of the most studied civilizations in history, and yet it still feels strangely out of place. Not because it proves ancient aviation, but because it looks just close enough to make people wonder. And in mysteries like this, sometimes close enough is all it takes. Number 5. The Drop-A-Stones. Some artifact mysteries are strange because the object exists. Others are strange because the entire story feels like it's floating between fact and legend. That's exactly why the Drop-A-Stones remain so disturbing. According to a widely circulated account, a series of mysterious stone discs were found in caves in the Bayan Har Mountains near the border of China and Tibet. The discs were said to contain tiny spiral grooves and symbols, almost like some form of encoded writing. The story claimed they were discovered alongside unusual skeletons with large skulls and fragile bodies. Then the tale became even stranger. Some versions said the discs told the story of beings called the Dropa, entities that had crashed on Earth long ago and were unable to return home. It sounded less like archaeology and more like science fiction. That, of course, is why the case became so famous. Because if the story were true, then the discs weren't just artifacts found in the wrong place. They would represent evidence of something far beyond ancient history. But there's a major problem. The evidence surrounding the Drop-A-Stones is deeply disputed. Many researchers believe the story is a hoax, exaggeration, or a confused blend of unrelated reports. Documentation is weak, original sources are difficult to verify, and no solid academic consensus supports the more extreme claims. So why include it at all? Because the mystery of the Drop-A-Stones reveals something important about artifact stories. Sometimes the location, the claim, and the myth become so entangled that the object itself almost disappears. Even now, people continue debating whether the stones ever existed in the form described, whether they were misidentified, or whether the entire case was built from sensational retellings. But that uncertainty only makes the story more haunting, because somewhere between archaeology and myth, between cave systems and impossible messages, the Drop-A-Stones became one of the most enduring, out-of-place artifact legends ever told. And whether false, distorted, or partly real, the story survives for one reason. It feels like the kind of discovery humanity fears and hopes to make at the same time. So, what are these artifacts really? Misunderstood objects, scientific anomalies, lost inventions from civilizations we barely remember, or simply examples of how badly we want the past to contain secrets bigger than ourselves? The truth is, not every artifact on this list is equally credible. Some are supported by physical evidence and serious research. Others live in the gray area between fact, misinterpretation, and myth. But all of them have one thing in common. They were found in places that made people stop, and question what they thought they knew. And maybe that's why these stories never disappear, because deep down, we're drawn to the idea that history is incomplete, that somewhere beneath the sand, the sea, the rock, or the ruins, there are still objects waiting to be found that could change everything. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe for more mysteries, unexplained discoveries, and dark stories from history. And tell me in the comments, which artifact do you think is the most unsettling? And which one do you think has the most believable explanation? Because sometimes the scariest mysteries are the ones that may actually be real.